On June 25, 1876, Sergeant Daniel Kanipe of the United States Army engaged in combat with the 7th Cavalry Regiment during the Battle of Little Bighorn. He played a pivotal role in the battle as a member of Company C. Renowned for his valor and personal account of the events, Kanipe was among the few survivors of the encounter. During the subsequent court of inquiry, he delivered essential testimony regarding the actions of Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer in the 7th Cavalry. Following the war, Kanipe continued his service in the Army and later authored a memoir detailing his experiences at Little Bighorn. His work, titled The Kanipe Story, is considered a vital historical document for understanding the conflict. Sergeant Daniel Kanipe's courage and dedication during the Battle of Little Bighorn mark him as an important figure in American military history. Before we proceed, we kindly ask you to support our community by liking and subscribing to our channel. We embarked on what would become a regrettable journey on May 17, 1876. Please remember to like, subscribe, and activate notifications for more comprehensive historical insights. Our journey began towards the Yellowstone River. After marching 12 miles, we established camp at the Big Heart River, taking time to survey our surroundings. By approximately June 10th, we advanced towards the Powder River. Out of the 12 units, 6 were assigned to a reconnaissance mission. We mounted pack mules with provisions for 10 days after departing from the wagon train at the Powder River and undertook a 2-day trek up the river. We then discovered the Indian Trail along the Rosebud River as we redirected towards the Tongue River. As the sun began to set, we prepared coffee and spent the night traversing the trail. The following morning, we brewed additional coffee and continued our journey along the path until midday. After General Reno, the commander of our detachment, noted that our 10-day rations were dwindling, we retraced our steps down the Rosebud River. We met the remaining 6 companies of the regiment, led by General Custer, at the junction of the Rosebud and Yellowstone Rivers, where General Terry, the department commander, was present. General Custer had been detained, reportedly due to his opposition to the post merchants who had received concessions at various posts, which were later revoked amid post-ridership scandals during President Grant's administration. It was necessary to procure items from these vendors before making purchases at the post office, where a glass of liquor cost 25 cents, typically served in small quantities. Custer's arrest stemmed from his imposition of a price ceiling. Nevertheless, he was accompanied by other senior Army officers and was assigned a command at the specified location. On July 22nd, Custer's contingent received a supply of food sufficient for 15 days from the steamship far west on the river. He was also accompanied by 2 Gatling guns and 2 Rodman guns, which he surrendered to General Gibbon, who believed he could manage without them. In hindsight, this decision is viewed as a miscalculation, as the Native Americans would not have ceased their retreat had he retained one of the Rodman cannons and discharged it even once. It is likely that the outcome would have been different, and I would not have been the sole survivor had we possessed a Gatling gun at that time. In truth, the Custer massacre might not have occurred. We dismantled our camp and proceeded with our march throughout the day on June 22nd. That night, Custer instructed that directions be communicated through hand signals, prohibiting the use of bugle calls and limiting the fire to only what was necessary for brewing coffee. But on the morning of June 23rd, we commenced our journey anew. After marching until nearly dusk, we established a camp and continued our expedition the next day, June 24th. On that day, we reached a site where the indigenous people had conducted both a war dance and a sun dance. The ground was firm and smooth due to their activities, and they had built brush huts from cottonwood trees. 6 Crow Indian scouts, part of our group, discovered the scalp of a white man, which belonged to a soldier under the command of Gibbon. The Indians, who harbored animosity toward the Sioux we were pursuing, were overjoyed to see the scalp hanging from a willow branch. They erupted in celebration, shouting, dancing, and yelling. What were they hoping to find? It would have been a dreadful day for the Sioux had they been found there, reflecting their fervor. The scalp was returned to General Custer, who inspected it before handing it to the men. At the time of his death, it was stored in the saddle pockets of my company's oldest line sergeant, Sergeant Finley. On June 24th, we marched throughout the day. Later that evening, around 10 o'clock, the Indian scouts who had been sent out earlier returned. It was dark, yet visibility was sufficient to read at 9 o'clock during the summer in that region. That night, we were instructed to pack our gear and prepare our horses. We marched through the night towards the confluence of the Little Bighorn and Rosebud rivers. General Custer led the regiment into a gully that seemed to provide an ideal hiding place for as long as we needed. However, as we entered at a brisk trot and gallop, Quartermaster Sergeant Hurst lost some hard bread from the packs of the supply train. Upon learning of this, General Custer ordered the sergeant to return and retrieve the bread. When the sergeant arrived at the spot where it had fallen, he found two Indians helping themselves to it. Upon noticing the approaching army, they fled. He reported the incident to General Custer upon his return to camp. He commanded us to prepare our horses. I presumed he aimed to catch the Indians off guard the following morning. However, since they were aware of our presence, he opted to take action immediately. We paused after ascending the ridge. General Custer departed for 2 hours accompanied by 2 scouts and Henry Voss, the chief trumpeter. Upon his return, he divided the regiment into 3 groups. He assigned 3 soldiers, A, M, and G, to Major Reno. Captain McDougal was tasked with leading the pack train with Troop B, while Captain Benteen was given command of 3 troops, H, K, and D. Custer retained Troops C, E, I, and F for himself. After departing the site, Major Reno was positioned to the left of General Custer, with Captain Benteen to his left. It was clear that 3 distinct approaches would be employed to assault the Indian camp. The pack train was to follow the main Indian trail under Captain McDougal's direction. We proceeded down what is now known as Benteen's Creek until we reached a crossing, where we encountered an abandoned Indian camp with lingering smoke from the fires. One of the remaining teepees contained a deceased Indian. General Custer ordered the teepee to be set ablaze. When Major Reno arrived, he was instructed to cross Benteen Creek, which he did. General Custer advanced down the creek with 3 companies. As we approached within a quarter of a mile of the confluence of Benteen's Creek and the Little Bighorn, I spotted Indians atop the bluffs overlooking the river. I alerted First Sergeant Bobo to their presence. At that moment, General Custer looked up, and Troops C, I, and F proceeded to the bluffs where the Indians had been seen. The general's brother, Tom Custer, commanded my Troop C. Despite our swift ride, the Indians had disappeared by the time we reached the summit. However, the teepees were visible for miles in every direction. Our Crow Indian scouts intended to stealthily descend and capture a few ponies. Several individuals attempted to descend, but they were shot for their efforts. Bloody Knife Reeve, a Ree or Urucara, Curly, a Crow, and Chief Scout Mitch Buey remained on the bluffs alongside us. We hastened to the far end of the bluffs to prepare for an assault on the Indian camp, which became apparent when the men from those 4 companies began shouting upon spotting it in the valley. Sergeant Finkel was positioned near me, close to Captain Tom Custer. Finkel called out that he was nearing his limit as his horse was struggling. I responded, urging him to come on if he could. He retreated slightly. The captain then directed me to return and find McDougal along with the pack train to relay the orders just issued by General Custer. He instructed me to inform McDougal to move the pack train directly to the elevated ground without pausing to secure any loose packs. They should be cut off if necessary. A significant Indian camp was present. I made my way back, initially perceiving it as misfortune, but it ultimately preserved my life. Had Sergeant Finkel received the orders, I would not be here recounting this tale, as he would have been the one to proceed. In the distance, I could see the dust rising from the pack train like a small cloud. As my group and others advanced toward the Indian camp, I headed in that direction. General Custer's last words echoed in my mind. We all rode at full speed, giving the soldiers 3 cheers as they ascended the hill. Some galloped past General Custer, unable to rein in their horses. "Hold your horses, boy," he shouted at them. "There are plenty down there for all of us." I rode back after they moved on. After delivering the orders to Captain McDougal at the pack train, I proceeded to Captain Benteen, as I had been directed to present them to him as well. Major Reno was in retreat from the base of the bluffs when McDougal and his men ascended the hill to provide support. Meanwhile, the Indians were shouting and firing, causing casualties among our ranks. Before we could intervene, the Indians would pounce on the fallen and scalp them. Tragically, Dr. DeWolf was killed as he reached the top of the slope. Had he moved forward just a few steps, he might have been spared. As I followed Captain Benteen back, I noticed some Indians rushing past. Initially, I prepared to fire at them, suspecting them to be hostile, but they turned out to be scouts fleeing the main battle, so frightened that they continued their flight until they reached the Powder River after abandoning Major Reno's command. After relaying Captain Bentine's orders, I returned to the ridge with the battalion, where we joined Major Reno and McDougal. I was unable to rejoin my company due to the presence of Indians between us and General Custer. Following an Indian attack after Major Reno advanced onto the bluffs, we were forced to retreat and establish skirmish lines. We suffered several casualties before we could reach them, as they were killed before we could provide assistance. The Indians continued to fire at us throughout the day and regrouped at night, resuming their assault on the morning of the 26th. The exact number remains uncertain, but we managed to eliminate a significant number of them. 68 individuals were injured in the camp, and we found ourselves cut off from water supplies. It was devastating to hear the pleas of an injured man who was in dire need of water, yet we were powerless to assist him. Some men were shot while attempting to fetch water, and they could not return with any for the wounded. I vividly remember the first gunshot that rang out during the two-day battle. It struck the ground nearby and passed directly beneath my horse's belly. Two officers, Lieutenants Harrington and Sturgis, along with 14 soldiers, were never found. Reports suggested that during the night, the Indians celebrated by decapitating them and parading their heads. The Indians killed 56 members of our group on the hill. On the 26th, the gunfire persisted throughout the day. By late evening, we observed the camp beginning to relocate. While the women busily packed their belongings, the warriors continued to fire upon us. On the morning of the 27th, not a single Indian was visible. We prepared coffee, gathered some water, and did our utmost to aid the injured. General Gibbon and his troops arrived around 10 o'clock, accompanied by General Terry. We greeted General Terry with enthusiastic cheers, and he was visibly emotional, shedding tears. It became apparent that General Custer and the four companies had been completely annihilated when he later reported seeing 200 troops in the valley below. Perhaps he had been ensnared just as we had feared. Later that afternoon on the 27th, I was granted permission to accompany Captain Bentine to the battlefield and explore the area freely. As I surveyed the deceased, I recognized several acquaintances, including a sergeant I knew. Among the bodies, I identified Sergeants Finkel and Finley, with Sergeant Finley lying at the head of his horse, Carlo, with 12 arrows embedded in him. For 2 consecutive days, they lay exposed to the sun, their bodies bloodied and disfigured. After stripping them of their garments, the women and young Native Americans relentlessly struck the men in the face with tomahawks or riddled them with arrows, making it evident which males had sustained injuries. They inflicted harm solely on the living, never on the deceased. None of the bodies retained any clothing. Everything had been taken by the Native Americans. It is estimated that they acquired approximately $25,000 in cash from us, as we had just received our paycheck at Powder River Camp before commencing this campaign, leaving us with no means to purchase anything. I could see where the last of them had fallen, gathered in a small heap. Only a portion of General Custer's back rested on the ground as he lay across several men, surrounded by the deceased. His heart had been pierced by a bullet. This final group was near my captain, Tom Custer, the general's brother, and his brother-in-law, Lieutenant Calhoun, who led H Troop. Excluding the women, there were around 4,000 Native Americans involved in the conflict, contributing to a total of 12,000 to 15,000 Native Americans engaged overall. Custer and his troops faced an insurmountable force. No living being remained on the battlefield to narrate the events that transpired after Custer and his 4 companies were defeated. Captain Keogh's horse, Comanche, was the sole survivor of the massacre, having sustained 7 gunshot wounds before being found. Among the fallen soldiers, numerous deceased Native Americans were also discovered. Approximately 75 Native Americans were located within 3 standing teepees, and it is impossible to ascertain how many more were taken as the Native American camp relocated. One Native American I encountered was clad in buffalo robes and blankets. I was taken aback to find that he possessed 4 women's scalps, 2 of which had long, red hair attached to a string as lengthy as my arm when I cut him free. I promptly discarded the scalps due to the gruesome nature of the scene, as I did not wish to be associated with such a disturbing trophy. After the battle, we interred our deceased comrades before embarking on the arduous task of transporting the wounded to the distant steamboat. The vessel had to retreat to the Yellowstone River after reaching its maximum distance upstream. A significant number of injured soldiers were brought aboard the steamboat for medical care, and fortunately, most of them made remarkable recoveries. Among the survivors was Old Comanche, the sole survivor of Custer's ill-fated engagement. As a testament to the events of that tragic day, General Headquarters mandated that this horse would spend the remainder of his life in a box stall. Comanche received care from a soldier of the 7th Cavalry Band and was paraded at the front of the regiment during dress parades, draped in a black mourning cloth. After the battle, the Native Americans simply dismantled their camp and continued their journey, while my regiment, having also fought in the battle, was not in a position to pursue them. We were all too severely injured and incapacitated to mount a successful counteroffensive. The Native Americans managed to escape without incurring further losses after achieving a decisive victory. I trust this personal account provides you with a different perspective on the Battle of Little Bighorn and the Great Sioux War of 1876. Stay tuned for more videos, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.